One. Hey guys, Daniel here. This is another video. My next guest needs no introduction. If you're a comic book fan, I'm sure you've heard his name. He's a writer and editor. There's very little he can't do. If you're a Vertigo fan, you may recognize some of his work. He's got to edit books such as Sandman, Swamp Thing, Sweet Tooth, Unknown Soldier, Day Tripper, The Unwritten, and much more. And he's also a writer. He's gotten to write comics such as Infidel and recently The Good Asian from Image Comics, which I have right here. And he's also gotten to work on TV shows such as Cloak and Dagger and Green Lantern for HBO Max. But Pornsak has very kindly agreed to come on for an interview and let me annoy him. But thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's so great to talk with you. And I need to like concentrate to not try to figure out like what every piece of art like behind you is as we're talking. I love it.
Like I like to just flaunt my beautiful creative skills. These are all done by my no money messing. They're literally all done by beautiful, brilliant artists who have very kindly agreed. All I had to do was steal it from them at conventions while they went.
Nice.
So it's so easy, you know. They're always caught up on something else. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Let's talk The Good Asian. It's a recent Image comic book. So what can you tell us about the book? You know, what for anyone who isn't aware of the concept?
Yeah, so the book it's a genre I've kind of made up called Chinatown Noir. It's a 1936 detective story in the style of Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe about the first generation of Americans that grew up beneath an immigration ban, the Chinese. And it's about a Chinese American detective from Hawaii that comes to 1936 San Francisco Chinatown in search of a missing girl in kind of classic noir tradition. And in classic noir tradition, it he stumbles on a murder and stumbles on a conspiracy that and stumbles on a mystery in the process. And it's also a way to hopefully tell like a cool noir story while also getting into a lot of actual Asian American history of the time.
Yeah, definitely. And so this book recently, people can go pick up the trade if they'd like to, I believe.
Yes, they can.
From their local comic book store.
Exactly. Yes.
That's because Pornsak has a gun to his head where he has to promote this book every minute of every
scene. I really do, though. Anytime music plays, I just start dancing. It's just instant.
I'm sure that's your job. They just shoot the ground and you jump up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so this book, it's so fantastic. But everyone make sure to go pick up the trade. And you can also pick up an ongoing. I believe issue 6, as of time of recording, comes out maybe tomorrow. Is it new comic?
Yes, that's right. As the time of recording, yes, tomorrow, 100%.
By the time this video is out, it'll definitely be out. But you should definitely go pick it up. And if you're just looking to get into this, and you don't know how to collect all the ongoing, well, you're in your own look. First volume, definitely go pick it up. But yeah, so The Good Asian. How did this come about? Did you pitch this to Image or
Yeah, I pitched it to Image. I mean, where it came up was, I learned about the Chinese Exclusion Act pretty much. My dad was very much into Chinese history in the later years of his life. And when he passed, part of me processing the loss was to learn more about the stuff that he was interested in. And that would eventually get me to Chinese American history, which which brought me to the Chinese Exclusion Act. And I was kind of shocked that I didn't know anything about it or the Immigration Act of 1924 and the fact that there was a ban on Asians kind of coming into the country. And I was shocked that I was really ashamed that I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know it to the point of I had to do a lot of research just to make sure I didn't read things wrong. And at the same time, very quickly, as I was thinking about all that, because that's how my brain works, I was thinking like, isn't it crazy? Like Asian crime solvers like Charlie Chan and Mr. Moto, Mr. Wong Detective were so popular during that time at a time where Asians couldn't enter the country. And that's where the idea kind of came from of like, hey, how maybe we can do one of those Asian crime solvers, but actually filter it through the lens of like what racial history was actually like at the time. And, again, all the credit to the world to Eric Stevenson. Like we sent in the pitch and I think within an hour we got a response back that was like, yes, please. And I will say that, that is coming for, I was fortunate enough to have my previous book Infidel come out that did well for Image.
Yeah.
That led to me to be on Eric's radar. Also, I was working with Will Dennis, who edits Scott Snyder and Jeff Lemire and all these great sort of people. So I was very fortunate to have Eric to get Eric's ear, but I've been very grateful for it.
Yeah, definitely. And so you just brought up there in a few points that this book, of course, coincides with an actual historic event, the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is, of course, a horrible event. But when it's something like this, do you think, how did this decision come about to like kind of blend away history? And is there a certain responsibility here? Because, if you're working on like, your own characters, you have a bit of leniency. But when it's something that's, you know, actually happened and it's sort, you kind of have to get some of it right and some of the details correct. So do you feel it's earned like a bit more of responsibility? Like, oh, I have to get this part right or anything like that?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I feel so much responsibility. I feel so much stress. I'm constantly stressed out I got something wrong. I'm constantly stressed out someone's going to yell at me at Twitter, or at least yell at me at Twitter for something new.
On
And
Twitter, never.
yeah, I know that never happens. Um, yeah, no, it's one of the reasons why. I mean, I spent a lot of time researching the book before, you know, I put quote unquote pen to paper or fingers to word processor or computer. And well, I just showed my age in like 3 different levels there. And
What's a VHS tape? What's that? I don't
yeah,
understand. What are
exactly.
you
I've got an
talking
8
about?
track back here somewhere. But but uh, there was a ton of research that happened, and honestly, I don't think I could have written the book without, you know, I have a historical consultant, Grant Dinn, who's kind of like my last line of defense. Where after I research the book, he reads all my scripts, he reads all the lettering proofs, and he's basically there to say, no, you got this right, you got this wrong, and all that kind of stuff. But if it wasn't for him, I'd probably be too petrified to actually, you know, put the book out, because
Yeah.
I'd be so scared of like getting it wrong. And I do feel like there's a responsibility. And, you know, certainly for the book, the goal is to have everything that happens in the book sit side by side with history and not contradict any. I mean, obviously it's a work of fiction, but I don't want to contradict historical fact at the same time.
Yeah. And so is it difficult to blend that, or are you kind of getting it
It's a
pretty well?
dance. It's
Yeah.
it's a dance. It's
Balancing.
absolutely a dance. Yeah. So like, you know, the research takes me most of the way there, 90% of the way there, and then 10% is as stuff comes in. You know, it's Grant will kind of come in and be like, oh no, you this is wrong, that is wrong. I'm like, oh, okay, let's move this here, let's move that there. You know, how can you kind of just position it just right? A lot of it is, you know, if you pick your shot early on of where you want to, you know, where you want to go, you kind of know like, okay, this is, yeah, this is a clear shot, this is the tricky shot. And so you can kind of, when you're there in the weeds of it and scripting and lettering and all that kind of stuff,
Definitely.
you can make the decision to navigate around. But it's usually when you're doing the research in advance, you know what the terrain looks like, so you know where you need to be careful and where you kind of have a clear path.
Yeah, and like so you touched on it, this is like a good old fashioned noir book, but it definitely has its own take on it. Like, I mean, I've never really been that interested in noir, but after sitting down, I read this all in one sitting. You know,
Oh, I appreciate that, man.
I was sitting outside of a museum. Museum sucked. This is something I'm only messing around. I was like, we were waiting to get in, so I just whipped down and I read it, and I was fascinated by it. It's so great. But when it comes to like noir, do you consider this story inspired by some previous noir stories? Because you just touched on, you know, Charlie Chan and a few of these other characters. So do you think it's kind of inspired by some previous noir stories, but you also want to put your new
Yeah.
spin on it?
Definitely. And like, and it's too like, you know, for people picking up the single issues, I get into it in issues 5 and 6, but
Yeah.
like there's a lot of in the back matter of 5 and 6, but there are a lot of books that inspired it. Certainly the Charlie Chan novels, The House Without a Key and The Chinese Parrot, but tons of noir, you know, Dashiell Hammett's The Continental Ops stories, specifically Dead Yellow Women, which is about Chinatown, takes place in Chinatown. Philip Marlowe, you know, my favorite there is Farewell My Lovely, you know, Lou Archer novels, Ross McDonald stuff,
Yeah.
Easy, Easy Rollins, Walter Mosley stuff. There's a writer by the name of Leonard Chang. He has a book called Over the Shoulder that I love. Another writer by the name of Henry Chang who does this Inspector Jack Yu series that's about a Chinese cop working in 1980s Chinatown. That was this influential to it.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of books that influenced it, ton of comics that influenced it. You know, Frank Miller's Sin City, Darwin Cook's, you know, Hunter, Hunter books, so much. Oh God, like everything by Ed Brubaker,
Yeah.
like so much. There's so many influences I'm throwing together here.
Yeah, definitely. And so I also want to touch on the main character, Edison Hart.
Sure.
He's at the heart of all this, and he's such a great character. But I also want to touch on that we can kind of see, actually, for anyone who isn't aware of Edison Hart, what can you tell us about that character?
Well, he is a Chinese American detective from Hawaii, and he was at a time the first first Asian American detective on the mainland was in 1957. So the book takes
Wow.
place in 1936. So it's just 20 years before that. And at that time, the only place you could find an Asian cop was Hawaii, and he's very much based on the real life inspiration of Charlie Chan, Changaperna, and much like Changaperna, the cops didn't need a Chinese American detective to write tickets. They needed them to go undercover into gambling and opium dens and come back out and give the raiding cops, the 411 of who the big troublemakers were and who to look out for so they could rate it properly. So there is a way, and I thought that was an interesting place to kind of use that to talk about sort of that conflict, to externalize a conflict that I feel like a lot of immigrant Americans feel, certainly Asian Americans feel, about conflicting loyalty between two different cultures, Western and Eastern.
Yeah, definitely. And put perfectly there. But the thing I really like about Edison Hart is how, as Hart, all he wants to do is actually do good. But there's this inner conflict where he has to lie, and you can see maybe he doesn't like that version of himself. And you see thread stories like, just again, I'm Edison Hart. I'm back to that version of me that I hate. And so is that like fun for you to play with? Get to see this character, and you can see both sides of the coin and how he wants to be a good person, and that's all he wants to do. But he's constantly being weighed down by other things. And so is it fun for you to play that character? And will we kind of see him progress more and go through these new ideas and concepts and stuff?
We'll definitely watch him progress. Like, I see the first trade as very much sort of like laying out the groundwork of what he is, what the world is, and what he's going to be conflicted. And in the back half of the book, we're going to watch him really, you start to see an issue at the end of issue 4, the end of the trade. It hits home a lot come issue 5, where we'll really sort of see him be put through the paces, and he will be forced to re-examine who he is and why he does what he does, and also to how much of what he tells himself is the truth, and to what degree he's lying to himself.
Definitely. And so another thing I want to touch on is that this is I believe it goes up to 9 issues and then it's done, or is it an ongoing?
It's not an ongoing, but we expanded it to 10 issues. So
brilliant. That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. Another issue. Perfect.
Yes.
I love this book, but I'm sad eventually some point it'll end. I'm just gonna fly over to LA and hold a gun to your head until you make more.
I'll take it.
You can see the sniper dots outside just pointed at
yeah.
But another thing I want to touch on is a creative team on this book is fantastic. Lee Lowridge as well, but you can't win them all. Sometimes
exactly. That's what we say too.
I'm sure Lee Lowridge must have had some blackmail on you, because he seems like the type of person to have blackmail on everyone.
I mean, that's how he gets all his jobs, really. At the end of the day, that's why you see him on so many books.
Exactly. So Lee Lowridge, please don't get any blackmail on me. Well, he already has blackmail on me. But yeah, definitely this book, and so the creative team was fantastic. So the thing about the Image books always fascinating. Did Image put the team together, or did you reach out to the artist?
Oh no, we reached out. I think so the first person I called was Will Dennis, my editor, who's like one of my best friends in the industry and knows crime fiction better than anybody. And so, we went out looking for an artist. We found Alex. I want to say we came to Image with like the 3 of us. And then after we got the green light, that's where, we brought Lee in, and we brought Jeff, who I work with on Infidel. So he was already gonna a gimme. And both of them, I mean, all kidding aside, I'm so proud that, like, to me, I think Lee's best work is his work on Deadly Class. And I think the book he's doing on Good Asian kind of like is on par. I mean, I'm very, very biased, obviously, but I think, it ties with some of Lee's best work. And Jeff is just killing it on design and letters. I love working with him so much.
Yeah, definitely. And I despise Lee Lowridge, but man, can he color books. He is such a great colorist.
Yes, he can. The number of people who say that, the number of people who despise Lee Lowridge but have to begrudgingly admit he's talented is long.
And I can see he's wafting through every minute of it. He loves it. It's what brings him joy in the morning. It's his bread and butter.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. And so do you think that, after 10 issues, there's maybe room for sequels, prequels, more Good Asian at all? Or is it a definitive story?
I would love to do more. A lot of it's going to come down to sales. It not just in terms of sales of if the book, if there's a sequel, but also in terms of me trying to gauge out, what the what the market will hold for a sequel to The Good Asian.
Yeah.
And so that it's one of the things I realized very quickly, that if you're trying to make those financial decisions, 10 issues is a horrible length to do that. It would be much easier if it was 6. But the story needed to be 10 issues. And one of the things the team has always said, and it's kind of the way I've tried to build these books, is like, you just go in thinking it's your only shot. And I was just like, if I only have one shot to tell this story, then let's make it 10 issues. Let's not compromise anything. And in success, we will have problems. And we do, in the sense that it might take me a while to figure out what the true audience, I'm very glad to say that there's an audience for volume, the first series. But if I do a sequel, I'm still trying to figure out what the audience for that sequel is.
Definitely. If your name's on it, I'll pick it up. If Lee Loweridge's name in it, probably not. But no, don't worry. I will buy it, but I'll make sure that none of it goes to Lee because I'm a nice
There you
person.
go.
No,
There
I've
you go. I'll make
absolutely.
sure none of it goes to Lee too.
It's all, like I said, the luxurious life of a comic book writer. You're rolling into cash, I'm sure.
There you go. There
That's
you
what
go.
everyone says. I just assume every
That's
comic book
clearly
writer
what everyone
in the
says.
whole world
That's
is rich.
clearly what everyone says.
But there's a few little pages here I'd like to touch on. I made sure that they're spoiler free. I just like to, get your voice on and see. Was this your choice or the artist? But let me just open that page in particularly, if I can ever find it. I knew it was a bad idea marking them with sticky tape. I just wanted to be fancy, but I'll find it in a minute. 1 second. Oh yeah, here this page. I was wondering. This is a really fun idea, and it says the next day, but it's in a
Oh
really fun
yeah.
panel format. So you see the words, but you can also see the panels inside them. Did
Yeah.
you write that in the script?
I did write that in the script, and it's
Brilliant.
stuff that it's one of the fun things about working with different artists is that you can kind of like take a look at what their strengths are, send them to places where you know that they do well, and like I could be wrong. I don't think Alex had done something like that before, so it
Yeah.
was a fun place to kind of take him. And then what he does, because he's so brilliant at it, is he gives us his own spin and makes it something completely unique that I would not have thought of.
Definitely, yeah. And like I think you put perfectly there, but you also have some amazing covers on this series. So
Yeah.
I assume you reached out to all of these different cover artists and of course shared your blackmail on them.
Yes, yes. I mean, like, first of all, the fact that we got Dave Johnson, I mean, I've worked
Yeah,
with
oh
Dave
definitely.
on two different books now, and it all started the same way. It's me saying like it'd be great to have someone like Dave Johnson, and in both times it was Will Dennis that said, "Why don't we just ask Dave?" And because I just assume that Dave, because he's a genius, has better things to do than to work with me, and I'm grateful every time. Oh, that spread's so good.
Absolutely. And look at this, just this brilliant double spread. I was immediately taken aback by this. I mean, I assume you scripted that, and I don't even know how this can come, or with this a design. I assume you scripted this.
Yes, yes, yes. I scripted that was an interesting one where I scripted it and I actually included two double page spreads from two different books. Just be
Yeah.
kind of like, here's my inspiration. And then Alex did his own thing, and then Lee did his own thing. So like that's to me the comics jazz of like you say something and they just find a way to make it their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just put it perfectly there. And you can really see the synergy coming off this book and just some more
Yeah.
fantastic pages you can see around
Yeah.
there.
I love that
Especially,
page.
I love that. Yeah, the family tree page. And I don't even know how, like I said, like all these, like the panels are so dynamic as well, which is, of course, props to the artist, but they're all such interesting designs. And I think if you're looking at these pages, I can tell you want to buy this because, I mean, if this doesn't convince you to buy this, I don't know what will. But yeah, everyone definitely make sure to pick it up. But yeah, we've cleared through a lot of my questions. My last couple of questions, let me just take you back to
Sure.
some of your Vertigo days. So
Sure.
like for anyone that doesn't know, you edited quite a lot of work on Vertigo. And so do you think your work on Vertigo in any way kind of prepared you for this? Because maybe you learned some new tricks from editing books or anything? Because you edited some of the biggest titles there, man. Like looking
Thank
back,
you.
Sweet Tooth,
Thank you. Thank
Unknown
you.
Soldier, and it was all just brilliant stuff. And so like looking back, do you think that kind of inspired you or gave you
Oh,
some new experience for
absolutely.
this?
Every day I am pulling from stuff I learned at Vertigo. Every single day. I mean, I was always sort of a student of comics, but like to be working at Vertigo at the time, it was like, it's like being a foodie and then all of a sudden you get to like it's all you can eat at the gourmet buffet. Like I could just pick whatever I want and like learn from it and find a way to make my own spin. There's so much can't I can't get over the amount of stuff that like everything that I do is influenced and informed by my time at Vertigo. It's so hard for me to like pick favorites.
Exactly. So my next question, what's your favorite Vertigo? No, I'm only messing around. I was like, I might as well do it. And no, I'm only messing around. But yeah, so like getting to work in Vertigo as an editor, how did you even get that job? So did you start off as assistant editor and then kind of moved up?
Yeah, I started assistant editor, moved up the old-fashioned way, but honestly, I fell ass backwards into editing comics.
The
I
best way to
was
happen. Best way for it to
yeah,
happen.
so many comics careers I feel like start that way. But no, comics was that thing I did for fun. I was a writer. I was writing, short stories. I was working in film, and I really thought that comics was this thing I was going to do for fun. Like it was the one hobby I had left, and I wasn't going to turn it into work. Just going into the comic shop every Wednesday, and I was trying to freelance. I told myself like, you know what, I'm going to take a year where I'm not going to work a part-time job. I'm just going to freelance. And I've done just enough film work that I think I can kind of keep working as a freelancer. And I'm not going to take a regular job for a year. And I think 3 months into it, a friend of mine sent me this email that was just kind of like, hey, Karen Berger at Vertigo is looking for assistant editor. And I don't know what any of those words mean, but it feels like you do. So you should look, I think you might be a good fit. And that would lead me to, and I wasn't looking for a full-time job. I only took that interview because I was such a fan of Karen Berger's. I just wanted to meet her. I just wanted to say, at one point in my life, I got to talk to Karen Berger. That was my biggest goal to come out of that. And that led me, that job interview led me to an editing test, which led me to another interview, and I took that job, and I've been in comics ever since. I love comics. I've been very, very, very fortunate that the industry and the art form has treated me very well.
Yeah, definitely. And your work in Vertigo is just fantastic. And like, and the fact you can continue and make brilliant comics as well, it's brilliant. And people say like, oh, I would love to go back to the days of Vertigo. I mean, the days of Vertigo are still here. Like the different writers are still, and the editors are still working in different fields. And if anything, there's more of a variety of books because they're all doing.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree with that. Like,
exactly. So
you've got Will Dennis at Image, you've got Mark Doyle over at IDW, you got Shelley doing stuff, Karen's over at Dark Horse. Like, yeah, everyone's still working, and there's more. There's just so much out there. Even my last book, Infidel, that didn't have a Vertigo. I mean, I guess I was the only Vertigo editor on that book, but like that didn't have a typical Vertigo editor, but that's such a Vertigo book in my mind.
Definitely. You just gave me the perfect segue there. Infidel. It's recently Halloween. You can see some of my Halloween decorations are all around the house. I've yet taken that. The Christmas tree is just over there when messing around. I think it's only a matter of time before we put the Christmas tree. But yeah, so Infidel is another one, your horror series, kind of like a horror series. I believe it was it says at the back here that was, in NPR's 100 favorite horror stories of all time. So high praise here. It's also mine as well, but I don't know if that will sell as much books. So Infidel, brilliant series. What can you tell anyone watching if they're not aware of Infidel?
Sure. Infidel is, I think we called it sort of a haunted house story for the new millennium. It's about a Pakistani American Muslim woman and her multiracial neighbors who live in a building that they realize is haunted by ghosts that feed off xenophobia. And so it's very much trying to use a horror story, the haunted house, genre, subgenre in particular, to talk about xenophobia and Islamophobia and racism.
Yeah, definitely. And you just put it perfectly there. And like, I think that book is fantastic. But when it comes to writing horror, is it difficult to write horror in comic books? Because, I do find that some people kind of struggle with that. And yet there's still like an amazing caliber of horror. Because so much of horror is jump scares. And when you're doing a jump scare in a comic, it's like, well, I could see the panel happening and it's a bit hard, for something like that. So did you kind of struggle with that, or?
It was less a struggle and more, I mean, that's definitely the challenge. And sometimes, and Infidel was part of that. Sometimes you take projects because they're going to be fun challenges. And that was the challenge for Infidel. The goal there was to do, like, how can we, do something to approximate watching a horror movie in comics as possible. And so part of the fun was like doing the things that, like, what are the scares that comics do way better than movies and TV? And like body horror is one of them. So like we leaned into that, playing with page turns and playing with like where to hide scares on a page so that you don't notice it until you've actually read it. Those are fun games. But it is tricky. And so it is something like I like to like save up all my comic book horror tricks and wait for the right project to use them, because it is you don't get the luxury of a cheap scare in comics. All your scares are high class scares. And so when you're so lucky enough to actually scare someone, so you have to really sort of think them through.
Yeah, and the real monster was the friends we made on the way. For some reason, Image aren't getting back. They're not getting back to my emails. Which all my stories do end with, it was the friends we made on the way. But I figure if I do it enough, they will never expect it each time because I implement it so perfectly. But yeah, Image, their email must be busted or something. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, absolutely. So, another thing I want to touch on, Infidel, I believe, can people pick that up from anywhere from?
Yep. You could find it on any bookstore, any book site, any comic book shop. If they don't have it in stock, they can order it very easily.
Yeah, and did you originally want Infidel to be a film, or was it always the plan for it to be a comic?
That's a good question. I think when I had the idea when I was an editor at Vertigo. And when I was an editor at Vertigo, it was an idea for a film because at the time I couldn't write comics because I was under exclusive with DC. But then when I sort of left, I was kind of like, what, I had this idea, and I think for the longest time, because it started as a film, like I didn't want to do it as a comic because I had read so many like bad scripts that people wanted to turn into comics. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. But it was to go back to something we were saying earlier, the challenge. It was the idea of like, and because I was also kind of like, none of this, the ideas I have for this the story, the screenplay would work as a comic. All the ideas for scares are all film scares. And then it was kind of like, oh, but then I get to kind of rewrite it just for comics. And that made it interesting and that made it exciting for me. And so yeah. So the original idea of it was was for film, but it's not like I, adapted a script or anything like that. I kind of had to write it, brand new just for comics in order to make it work.
Definitely, absolutely. You just put it perfectly there. But I've taken up so much of your time. So my last and final question before we finish up. If anyone was looking to get into comic books, what advice would you have for them or anything like that?
Ooh. Let me see. Okay, so I think there are two types of people. If you're a writer, I should say, there are two types of people who get into comics, and there are people who can draw and there are people who can't. And the people who can draw, I envy you. I am so jealous. It could not be a better, not that it's ever easy to make comics, but it's a little straightforward. You can put stuff on the web, you can draw something, go to your local Kinko's, your local copy center, put things up to Staples and start to hand them out. Like, that's great. And a very viable and you get to control the art form that I certainly envy. Then there are the people who aren't writers and things or aren't artists, and that's a lot tougher. And the only thing I could say there, because comics is a pricey game, is I've said this before, I don't know how to give anyone any advice to make a comic, but I can give you advice on how to be a comic book creator. And the difference to that is being a comic book creator means immersing yourself in the world of making comics. And sometimes that's going to conventions and making friends, but other times it's just going on Twitter or your social media thing or the internet in general and making friends, in the sense of, as a comic book creator, you want to start very early on to be a champion of artists, the champion of good artists, especially, but a champion of artists in general. And one of the things I find is that the more you authentically champion the art that you love, whether it's drawn or whether it's written, or illustrated or whether it's written, the more you champion the art you love, you will find yourself in a community of like-minded people. And that community is how you will, as a comic book creator, as a comic book writer, that community will eventually be the path on how you make comics. That community will be the people that gives you heads up on publishers looking for things, or artists that are available, or artists who needs work, or artists, all that. Doing that by yourself, there's a way to do it by yourself that if you can't draw, and that involves, and some people do it, a good chunk of money. It means paying an artist their going rate. But if you can't afford that, then being part of a community and rising with that community and finding ways to support other people and support artists specifically is, I think, the best way to sort of to break into comics.
Absolutely, I could not have put it better myself. This praise from the master himself, some advice. Everyone, make sure to go listen to that. But yeah, Pornsak, has been such a pleasure chatting with you. Before we finish up, are you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anything like that?
Yeah, I am on Twitter. I'm real_Pornsak, and on Instagram, I'm real_Psak.
Brilliant, definitely. And everyone can go pick up The Good Asian Volume 1 and Good Asian Issue 6, which, as of time of recording, will be out. Maybe Issue 7 will be coming out soon. And so anything else you'd like to promote besides those two?
I think right now I'm just putting all my emphasis on The Good Asian. If you're in a spending mood, pick up Infidel. But right now, Good Asian is the organ grinder this monkey is dancing to.
Absolutely. Everyone make sure to go pick it up. I can't recommend this book enough. A review will probably be coming soon where I sing everyone's praises on this book, but please do pick it up. I'd highly recommend you do so. And go check out Pornsak on Twitter, Instagram. His links will be all down in the description and you should go check him out. As always, please make sure to donate to the National Deaf Children's Society if you do have the means. If not, that's completely fine. But you can go follow me over on Twitter at SamboGizmo1 if you'd like. But yeah, go pick up The Good Asian, and thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe. Bye.